They told us it was COVID. That was a lie. They told us that it was just not even happening. It was a data blip. It'll go away. That was a lie. The fact of the matter is that Democrats have engaged in an all-out leftist assault on the criminal justice system, from policing to prosecution to incarceration at all levels. And what we're seeing is the criminal element in place after place, city after city, doesn't feel like they're going to suffer serious consequences. They commit more and more serious crimes as a result, and people are fleeing cities now because of this. It's happening all over the country, and they should flee these cities. And there should be political consequences for the people that have made these insane decisions. We keep coming back to this. We're seeing stories that certainly indicate how violent, how dangerous a lot of cities have become, and it's happened in the last few years. But the numbers are staggering. What we see happening across the country is just horrific, the number of shootings that have happened. We have Philadelphia on track for, after last year, the most murders in the history of the city.
Think about how crazy that is for a city like Philadelphia to be setting all-time records right now.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And they're going to have an all-time record year for murders this year. Remember, very progressive far-left prosecutor. You have similar numbers in a lot of other cities. Portland, where we're on a great station, KEX in Portland, and we really appreciate all of our Portland folks tuning in. A lot of them are, and we had them call in before, Portland area residents, right? They live outside the city because the city's been turned. The Pacific Northwest, I've said this before, I know you agree, Clay, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and Seattle and Portland should be...
One of the most beautiful parts of the world.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Seattle and Portland should be jewel cities of this country. People should be just... And San Francisco was... Look at this. San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, huge problems. Portland could surpass last year's shootings. And Clay, what was it? It's up... Murders in Portland, homicides in Portland are up.
I've got it right here directly in front of me, Buck. A huge article in the Wall Street Journal. I was reading it over the weekend. They averaged in Portland, Buck, between 2000 and 2019, 21 murders a year. Virtually, I mean, look, it happened, but it was almost unheard of for the first 20 years of the 21st century. Last year, Buck, they had 88 murders in Portland. Over a quadrupling. First 19 years, almost unheard of for a murder to happen. I don't know that there's any city in America that has quadrupled its murder total in the last couple of years like Portland has. And for the most part, this is a Wall Street Journal article. Wall Street Journal, best newspaper in America, and there's not a close second right now, by the way. Wall Street Journal, 88 murders in 2021. They're on track for another massive increase over the historical averages in 2022. We saw it in 2020. This is insanity.
So you also had 1,000 shootings in Portland last year, which was a massive increase. Think about it, there's only 365 days in a year, everybody. Portland is not a large city. It's 650. I mean, it's a mid-sized city, 650,000 people in Portland. So what does that? Puts it probably... top 50, maybe top 40 cities in the country. I'd have to look at the specific numbers. But Clay, by way of comparison, so Portland had, what was the most recent number? I just did the math.
21 for 20 years,
right. So what's the most recent? Last year it
88 last year.
If you were to do the math on this one, if Portland were the size of New York City and you expanded out the murders per capita, you just did the math on this one, you're getting pretty close to 1,000 murders, right? That's what it would be if Portland were the size of New York. If you look at a city like Baltimore, for example, which has hundreds of murders a year, and you expanded that to be the size of New York City, you would also see a similar. You're getting to like the worst days of the 1990s. New York had 2,200 murders in 1990, 1991. We're going back to the days when people didn't feel safe at all in the streets. We're moving in that direction. And now let's get to the why. The answer is stupid ideas from Democrats.
Yes.
And I know it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
This is not, they told us it was COVID. That was a lie. They told us that it was just not even happening. It was a data blip. It'll go away. That was a lie. The fact of the matter is that Democrats have engaged in an all-out leftist assault on the criminal justice system, from policing to prosecution to incarceration at all levels. And what we're seeing is the criminal element in place after place, city after city, doesn't feel like they're going to suffer serious consequences. They commit more and more serious crimes as a result, and people are fleeing cities now because of this. It's happening all over the country, and they should flee these cities. And there should be political consequences for the people that have made these insane decisions.
And here's what I would point out to everybody. The reason why Portland is such a fascinating window into failed Democrat policies is Portland is probably the most left-wing major city in America today. And I'm defining major city for everybody out there. Kind of city that could have a pro sports franchise, right? Trailblazers, Portland, they have a pro
Portland's
sports
about
franchise.
25th, 26th by population. I checked. I said top 40. It's like 25th, 26th.
Okay. Name a city that is more woke than Portland. I bet almost everybody out there listening, right? I mean, they made a show called Portlandia, which was basically mocking the white woke community that is the underlying foundation of Portland. Used to be, to Buck's point, a jewel of the Pacific Northwest, one of the safest places in all the country. I bet there's not one major city in America, Buck, that has quadrupled its murder rate in the last couple of years. In the entire United States, I bet you can't find one. Is it a coincidence that the wokest city in America, the one that repudiated police the most aggressively and went in with left-wing defund the police, Antifa protests constantly, is it a surprise that they quadrupled their murders, that went up more than anywhere? I don't think so. I think it's a natural consequence. And if we're not careful, every city becomes Portland.
And let's look at what they did. I mean, we talk about this in the terms of the stats, the numbers. What are the decisions that they made? And when I say they, Democrats, down the line, not a single Republican. This isn't a both sides issue. This isn't they do things, we do things, left and right. No. Democrats have total dominance of the city. They do things like they say, let's let people live on the streets, meaning camp on the street. Set up campsites wherever they want, on the street, in the park, outside your home. Well, that also brings down property values. That makes people feel less safe. And sure, most of the people camping out aren't actually harming anybody, but it's unsanitary. They're harming themselves. They make drugs legal for people to do outdoors. They've had a huge increase in overdose deaths, which they said they legalized drugs to make people safer from the drug use, and actually more people are doing drugs and dying as a result. Then they say, well, we don't want to be too strict with people when it comes to not only public urination and defecation, which they decide is also legal, all quality of life crimes. Then it's, let's not arrest people for shoplifting. Let's set a really high limit, say, I don't know, $900, which is what they've had in California recently, before you're going to get arrested and charged with a felony or anything serious at all. So let's effectively decriminalize stealing, open-air drug use, living on the streets, urinating in public, indecent exposure, which is going on all the time. Essentially, let's bring as many criminal, deeply schizophrenic drug abusers possible, have them descend on our city, and then when people do really bad stuff, let's not lock them up for long periods of time because we don't want mass incarceration, and let's just see what happens. And we're seeing what happens.
And the small businesses that are trying to make a living, the small business owners all over Portland, people don't feel comfortable on the streets. So they're not coming into downtown. They're not traveling around like they ordinarily would. In fact, Buck, let's open. We do this every now and then. We have a large audience in Portland. I'd like to hear from people who live in Portland what the last couple of years have felt like as your murder rate has quadrupled. And we could talk about all different sorts of crime, but one reason we like to talk about murders on this is it's hard to determine sometimes whether other crimes are going up because people might not call the police as often over their scooters getting stolen like happened to Buck in New York City.
Trauma.
But for the most part, if there is a dead body, there is an investigation. It's a tally that's somewhat reliable. quadrupling murder rates, 1-800-282-2882. Only Portland people. What's it like to live in your city right now and have all of these failures raining down upon you, such that arguably Portland is the biggest failure of the post-George Floyd era in America?
It is also really the home city of Antifa. It is the city more than any other. I mean, Seattle's probably right up there. I mean, but Portland has an Antifa presence that is it's consistent. Anytime there's any kind of a right-wing gathering, a conservative or a Republican gathering, Antifa is going to show up there. So, Antifa is really just a distillation of left-wing. They're essentially the shock troops of left-wing wokeism. And do you remember when the mayor there, Ted Wheeler, during the whole BLM summer of violence and destruction, Ted Wheeler showed up, the mayor of Portland. He's like, hey, guys, I'm here for you. They're like, shut up, you little nerd. We hate you. And it's just, yeah, exactly. It's just destruction and anger and rage and stupidity, all with Democrats blessing it, pushing it along.
Almost all white, woke Democrats. I just want you to be thinking about this. The worst people in America, the people who are destroying America the most, white, woke Democrats. And Portland is a perfect approximation and epitomization of exactly what's going on there.